Ah, oh man, it has been so long since the last time I almost had the problem of clicking the wrong thing that it got me by surprise, man. I almost fucking hit this shit about end stream, but I mean, I don't know why do I get so much confusion about it. I think it is because they are they aren't even close. I don't know. I I don't know. I think it happens because it is blue, and I associate 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 the blue more with something like a button that I need to click or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. I'm the only thing I can properly say is we are ready. I think so. Transition. Haha. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome once again to our beautiful place, to our beautiful farm, where in this occasion we are going to ponder as always. We are going to consider some stuff and we are going to see what we can extract from what we have in front of us. As always, welcome everybody, welcome beautiful lurkers, beautiful bot watchers, welcome every single one. In this occasion, we have in particular the lecture number 12 to keep observing and learning about the course Introduction to Psychology. So yeah, I don't think we have that much to add. I simply want to start as fast as I can because I don't think I am running on that tight of a schedule, but just in case, let me set up everything else. Okay. If I am not wrong, I should have it properly set up. Yeah. Test. Yeah. I knew it. I was. Let me mute the clock sound. Let me activate the background audio, and with this, we are on the correct window. Yeah. Okay. Now for real. YouTube. Here it is. Transition, and there it is. There we are. In this case, on a new start from this new lecture. So yeah, without any further ado, let us commence this learning experience.
Okay, good afternoon. So in the last couple of weeks, we've gone through some of the major human capacities that you have and I have, and most people have most of them, right? Which are the ability to see the world around us, to attend to what's important, to learn lessons from life, to remember things while we sometimes forget things. And today we're going to talk about another huge dimension of human experience, of the human mind, of the human brain, language. The ability to talk to one another, I can talk, you can listen, and vice versa, to read, to communicate in the ways that are so remarkable. Our life is flooded with language, right? That we hear, that we read, and so on. So when psychologists try to sort of divide up language into studyable components, they talk about comprehension, understanding what somebody says to you when you're an infant or now as an adult, or reading text, or producing speech, which you can do with your mouth by speaking, or you learn to write. So you can both comprehend and produce language, both visually and orally. And a thing that has, greatly enamored linguists to figure out is how a language that we speak is endlessly generative. I'm not sure you can actually calculate out how many sentences we could possibly produce, but just for fun, people have done stuff, and they said it would take 100 trillion years to memorize all the sentences we can produce. I'm not sure that's exactly the right number, but it's a lot, right? Because we can say a lot of different sentences and understand what a person's saying. It's an incredibly generative system for communication, one person to another. So when
I mean, so far, okay. I guess it will be interesting to see what there could be to extract from language. I guess. Yeah, this is early enough so that there shouldn't be anything like the usage of. And I don't mean it in a bad way, but simply as something that will not happen. There won't be any pronouns and anything like that, and anything like the concept of gender behind the words and so on and so forth. But aside from that, the things that could be extracted, I guess, are going to be interesting, taking into consideration that always language is the biggest tool that we have most of the time to communicate with others, as it is almost impossible to follow or to be able to catch up the rhythm to which we talk and the speed at which we can, let's say, produce understandable concepts by simply speaking about them rather than trying somehow to, let's say, put it into an image or put it into something that will still needs to be accompanied by similar stuff, like, like text in any other way that isn't speech but still needs to be read for the sake of a proper understanding. So yeah, I guess it is interesting. Yeah, I will say the only kind of question that arises in my mind is how much is it going to be talked about. I think this is one of the few lessons that I can remember was said they are going to get back later on, because there was earlier in, I think it was on the third or the fourth one, a mention about language and how it influences the learning of things based on the amounts of not sentences but rather syllables that exist on every single language. Like, if your language has less syllables per word, you can remember more, because it also comprises how you learn concepts, the amount of syllables that are behind those concepts, for the sake of, I will guess, an easier storage in the mind or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. Easy so far.
People in psychology think about different aspects of language, levels of language. They often divide it into something like this. Phonology is the sounds of language that we hear, that we acquire as infants, that we use to speak to one another. Syntax, grammar, and by this isn't like school grammar, not get the sentence right. It's just the understanding of the organization of words and how that changes the meaning of the sentence. Syntax. Semantics, what do the words mean? What do the groups of words mean? Pragmatics, and we'll talk about each of these a little bit. Sometimes, a person is sarcastic. You go, that was an awesome lecture yesterday in psychology. Somebody could say that in 100 trillion years. And you go, yeah, right? Okay. So that's the pragmatics versus semantics. Then, of course, it's not just sentences. We have whole discussions. And another aspect of language we'll just touch on a little bit today is the emotional comprehension and production. The tone somebody speaks in, the tone you produce are also informative. So there's many aspects of language. We'll start with sort of the most basic, or phonology. So phonemes are the words that people use to describe the building blocks of speech sounds. So boy versus toy are differ by one phonemes. Phonemes are the building blocks of the sound of language. Human use about 100 phonemes across languages, but any given language only uses a subset. And this has really interesting consequences. Of course, a language could only exist in the world if you could understand those phonemes. Phonemes that are ununderstandable aren't going to be part of anybody's language. But different languages, for historical reasons, have ended up using different subsets of phonemes. And we'll come back to that. When we're babies, for about the first 6 months of our lives, we're universal learners. We know all the phonemes and we respond to all of them. As we become native language speakers and listeners, we become only good at the ones that are used in our language, and our ability to even recognize the ones that are not in our language disappears. You can get it back some, but the older you are, you never get it back fully. So we're universal learners at birth, but we become enslaved to the language that we are native speakers of and listen to within months of birth. English is about 45, so it's more than the number of letters we have. And sometimes people get confused a little bit that letters are phonemes. They're not. So, hot and cold have the O, hot and the O sound and cold are different sounds, same letter. So there's many more phonemes. Even in English, when they say it's about 45, depending on dialects, you can have a couple more or a couple less. So again, we're born to use all of them, and we use them or lose them. It's not, we don't entirely lose it, but we're never as good if we try to learn a distinction once we become older than that. Humans understand speech at an incredible rate. Typical fast talking is about 180 words a minute, 14 phonemes a second in a continuous speech stream, but people can go up to 250 words. We're incredibly fast language processors, incredibly fast language processors. So.
Okay. No, wait. There is something else.
Conceptualize in the most simple way, what we have to do to get to a word that we hear, to get to its meaning. Well, acoustic information comes to the ear. Those are, waveforms, physical things arriving at our ears. We sort of, in some way, figure out how those correspond to phonemes and then map that in some way to words that have meanings in the world.
Okay, there it is. I think, it shouldn't be that hard to comprehend. Like, the idea itself being, you can learn about the stuff as long as you put it correctly into its place, as always, as with every single other thing, that you can only learn about what you can understand, let's say. So in that sense, it is easy to grasp how it happens like that, let's say. But the only interesting thing would be, I guess it wasn't really mentioned, but or maybe it is not needed to be mentioned. The fact that when you can understand how the spaces between words also serve a function on the way in which you understand them, it also has another deep layer or another layer of deepness out of this idea, let's say. I wouldn't think it is necessarily something, yeah, maybe it isn't that important to talk about it in a sense of you give as known that if you can understand where the spaces, where the blanks, and where those commas and full stops and skip a row, similar things are placed in a sentence, you will not probably have an easier time, as it maybe, yeah, in normal speech you don't really have the possibility of seeing it happen. You need to formulate the sentences in a way in which you imagine how they might be displayed on paper, but at the same time the structure that is followed by speech isn't the same that is created when you, let's say, simply talk, I will guess. As sometimes, yeah, I mean, for example, you don't stutter commonly when you write, but it happens that on speech it is rather common to stutter, to elongate some sounds, to make so those space filling sounds, to also correct oneself when we're speaking, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I will guess interesting, I will guess. But at the same time, what else is there? I don't think there is that much more for me to say. Like, probably the knowledge about how to properly learn, and even more, what it represents to try and use the mind for the sake of understanding, like, was it a limit that we can only comprehend 250 phonemes per minute? No, 250 words by the rate of 14 phonemes by second on the minute? Or is it that we can even train ourselves to go even faster? I mean, probably the people who is capable of watching stuff like at triple the normal speed or fourth the normal speed might develop themselves further by giving themselves the possibility, or not the possibility, enhancing their senses in the way in which they can integrate more information coming from those places instead of letting anything else be more important. I will guess, yeah, in that sense it is only similar to the idea of you can assimilate things and you can become better at doing what you can do the most, let's say. In this case, for example, if you were to lose your vision, you will need to adapt to a world in which you might need to hear more. And if you notice that you need to hear more, you also notice and become aware of the fact that you can, in some cases, increase the amount of words that are said or the speed at which things are said for the sake of hearing more. Not because you need to hear more in those cases, but rather because you are capable of hearing more and processing more information. As in a sense, supposedly it isn't that common for people to completely lose their vision, but I will guess for those who completely see dark instead of some resemblance of anything, those who have completely lost their vision will probably have an easier time processing what is it that they are talking about when not that is being talked about, as they can not use their brain, let's say, on the part of observing and absorbing what is happening on the visual field. But yeah, I mean, kind of, I will guess, I hope it is explained, because in a sense you can also make sense of what you see, or not what you hear, sorry, by basing it on what you have seen before. Like, if somebody says that they were eating an apple, most of the time you not completely envision what they are saying. For example, if I said I am eating an apple right now, you don't envision the potato that is me eating any particular apple with those particular shapes of red, let's say, but you can envision someone eating an apple, and because of that you can also comprehend what is being said easier than if you didn't have the visual comprehension about what is being represented, I will guess. But yeah, interesting, I will say. Very, on one hand, very weird. On the other, very interesting. Even more because you can almost see what it ends up being. That, or it opens the possibility to question how those who have no vision can understand words, as they have no way of integrating what it represents, what they are being told about, if they have never heard about it. But I guess, yeah, pretty crazy, something like that. I mean, yeah, it loops back into questions like, how can somebody who has no vision think about the world, and how can they have dreams, and so on and so forth. And for example, what it ends up being if, yeah, I will guess, for example, somebody who has no hearing would have an easier time on this world than somebody who has no, what is it? No vision, I will guess. But I don't know, my man. Very crazy so far. Yeah. I think that is all I can conclude so far. So let us continue.
And the reason why machines understanding what you say is shockingly hard to do a good job on is for the following reason. There's a huge difference between a word by the time your mind understands what it is and the nature of the signal that arrived at your ear. So we talked a lot about that in terms of the retina and vision, right? You have this very impoverished stuff that arrives on your retina, and then the whole rest of your brain, millions and millions of neurons and synapses, reconstruct what's out there from a very impoverished retinal input. And the same thing happens in audition. What gets to your ear is incredibly impoverished, and the rest of your brain has to brilliantly reconstruct what it heard and assign it to meaning. And so part of the challenge of your mind and brain to do that is this. This is a representation of something like the physical signal that arrives at your ear. And you could say, well, here's one word, here's another word, what's the problem? Okay, but this is all the signal that arrives at your ear for the word captain. So here's the C, all this stuff for the A, a period of long silence that sets up the P. Okay, turns out, I'll convince you of this in a moment, that our speech is full within words of silent breaks that are incredibly informative and alter our perception of what's physically going on. Then the little T, this long stuff for the AI, this long stuff for the N. So the physical signal to your ear, barely resembles what seems like a single unit, captain, right? And where is that pause? When a person doesn't say cap, or no, doesn't say cut. 1, 2, 3, attain, right? Okay, but but the pause is happening, and it's incredibly informative, as I'll show you. So that's the incredible thing. Your auditory system, your language system, has to reconstruct the sound into phonemes, into words. It's not obvious from the physical signal in the ear. It's not even that the physical signal at the ear gives you much information at the outset about whether you're hearing one word or two words or three words. So here's what and do you mean as one big blend. Where is do, where's you mean? And why does what look so separate? And these three words, what do you mean, get all garbled together, and you have to unpack them by your brain and mind. Here's another example. John said that the dog snapped at them. The dog snapped. Here's what's coming roughly to your ear, taken from spoken speech. And here again, notice that the boundaries that you can see here, the gaps of silence, occur, not very related to the boundaries between the words that your mind ultimately understands. So here's the word the, dog. Here's S for snapped. Here's a good pause, but that's a pause between the P sound and the T sound. I mean, that looks like a good word boundary. To a machine, that's a very good word boundary, okay? It's not a word boundary for you. You know snapped is one word, and here comes at. At is kind of blended into the T, right? So there's this physical signal. It doesn't even give you breaks where words separate from one another. It's kind of a continuous mix of breaks and silences. So here's to convince you that a silence carries incredible information in it. Let's see, make sure I have the volume. Okay, so I'm going to play you this. This is the physical signal to your ear, the word say. Say. Okay, then yeah? Okay, I always worry because Tyler's an expert in this, and I'm always like, please, Tyler, don't embarrass me when I'm wrong. Okay, you don't have this pressure out there, but the teaching assistants are all experts in something or another, and then they know more often than I do in that topic, and we hit their topic in the course. I'm looking over there nervously. Okay, so here's say. Now they're going to take this thing and just separate this, just in the way you do a physical signal on a computer, just separate it in time. They're just going to add a little bit of time. And what do you hear? Stay. The T sound that makes is simply adding silence here to produce that. Now, that's what you hear all the time. It's not a random choice. But isn't it amazing that silence is as ultimately informative for your mind as actual language sounds themselves? And all this is happening on the order of thousandths of a second in bits of information. That's bad enough. Here's another amazingly tough thing. So people like to compare consonants that have a lot of similarities but some interesting differences, ba and da. So it's really comparing B versus D. It's throwing on the A just to have a vowel sound. So here again is a representation of what's coming to your ear. Notice that all the difference between the B and the D, these two consonants, all the physical difference is occurring in 40 thousandths of a second. 40 thousandths of a second is all the physical difference that you get as you hear these two things. 40 thousandths of a second. And yet, you can hear the word bad, and you're not going bad, dab. Come on, those thousandths of a second, right? And not only that, there'd be another word in a sentence. That's why people use the word speech stream, and we think of it as a speech torrent, right? Phonemes, 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 breaks, all garbled together, and your mind has to go back and constantly, instantly, and brilliantly figure out what you heard. So let me give you another example, because part of the challenge of this are phonemes occur in the context of words and sentences. So make sure I have good volume on this. Okay.
Okay, no, wait. I think I don't care really for a test. I mean, it can be traced back to what we were saying before. Like, you can have the possibility also of observing stuff in this case and getting into the conclusion that maybe you can have an easier time at understanding things if you were to train yourself for the sake of it. I mean, nothing really stops you from not increasing, lowering the amount of time that it takes your brain to comprehend what is being said. I would guess one of the few problems would be something similar to the different intonations and ways in which things are said and so on and so forth, but maybe it has also to deal with the fact that most of the time we don't really have such an easy time as it ends up being a reality that we are also influenced by accents and similar stuff. So, for example, something that I can truly use here as a good example is people has a hard time understanding sometimes what I try to say because they are not accustomed to hearing such an accent like mine. And because of things like that, it also happens that if they hear that accent for long enough periods of time, they can also accustom themselves to hearing it more than they did the first time. But I guess, I don't know. It has a lot to unpack in a sense, and on the other hand, it also gives the possibility of trying to see how we could try to train, maybe? I mean, I hope it is going to be mentioned here, because there is also a new concept that has been analyzed lately. I don't know how lately, that is why I don't know if it is going to be mentioned here. But for example, we are better listeners than we are readers. Not because it means that we can utilize our vision to fulfill the action of reading, but rather that sometimes we have a harder time getting our focus and our attention down to the act of reading, while hearing is easier to do as our primal side is more accustomed to picking up cues that are made by sounds and similar. So in that same sense, what I was trying to go with that is we can learn more if we utilize more things that represent or that are associated with speech instead of simply going almost crazy trying to integrate text over or different ways of learning. In this case, almost I will say as another part that it still needs to be analyzed, because for example, you still have an easier time if you write down something because you can see it. While if you say it, even if you say it, you don't have a possibility of going back to what you said. And if you say it, also it happens that sadly you lose the possibility of really tracing back to what you said, even if you record what you said, as you can only hear one thing at a time. Or let's say, yeah, you can only concentrate on what is being said in the moment. You can make sentences out of what is being said right now, but you can't see the full sentence being displayed in front of you. You can see the whole sound waves being displayed in front of you, kind of what is being explained here. You have an easier time picking up things from what is being said, but it doesn't mean that you can put into proper understandings or proper things. Yeah, like I said before, also you don't have the possibility of properly seeing how it is that a sentence should be punctuated based on what is being said, aside from things like a question mark and some deeper intonations and emotions that signify that, for example, a sentence is finished and things like that, you know. But I don't know, it feels very crazy. I mean, I guess one doesn't really think about what is the act itself of hearing, as it might not seem so complex, but when you delve into it, you find so much more than what you could have ever expected. You get surprised by what you can and what you can and what you truly end up extracting from it. So yeah, I think that is all I can say so far. Very, very, very nice, I will say, at the very least. But well, I mean, what isn't really nice from here? Even if there were complex and rather tedious concepts to talk about, they were also now. So yeah, sorry, let us continue.
So let's do this first one. What was that? What? Okay. Here's the same thing, and a person is going to say this now all by itself. Little. You got that right? Okay. Mary saw the 3 little pigs in the corridor. Okay, but here's the amazing thing. The first sound you heard, and I'll replay it, they took the word little, and they cut it out from the last sentence you heard. When little is said all by itself, what comes to your ear is literally the first thing you heard. Not this, because when you say a word in isolation, little, people say it differently. But we almost never talk like that. We almost always have a sentence. And it turns out the way we say things, and therefore the way you hear things, is hugely influenced by what comes before it and what comes after it. Never mind things like the speed at which different people talk, the accent they talk, or the loudness of the background conversation, okay? But just simply, the fact that you're going to say little by itself, how does that work? It's amazing, right? Listen again. If you heard little all by itself, and it's exactly the same physical signal. Maybe it's not so. Okay? Let me try that again. That's exactly the same physical signal, as Mary saw the 3 little pigs in the corridor. What you hear easily as little is exactly that. Words in isolation, and this is a great demonstration. If you hear a word cut out, the reason why it sounds like nothing is your mind is already preparing how to interpret that given what you heard just before it, and also a little bit what you hear just after it, okay? Your mind is constantly fixing up things because it knows what's going on, what's going into it, what's coming out. It's not because it just simply hears the word itself. If we lived in a world where people just need one word every half an hour, we could do this. In a world where we're talking to each other in sentences all the time, we have to do this. Here's another example of our brilliant auditory system for hearing these kinds of things. So again, these are representations of how this physical signal arrives at your ear. Here's the word bet, bee, boat, and bird. They all start with the same B sound. That's easy, right? But look what came to your ear. Look at this signal, this signal, this signal. Look at this one. How different does this look? It's different because what follows bird influences how this is said. But you can see that you can translate both of these into the B sound pretty easily. Now look at these words. These all start with D. Look at how bet and det look almost identical. We said it's only 40 milliseconds difference, 40 thousandths of a second difference of physical signal through your ear. But you can tell the word bet versus det. And look at the word D, how different it looks from word to word. So your mind is constantly figuring out what you're hearing, the problem of invariance, and it's constantly coming to you in incredibly variable ways, okay? All right. So one of the tools we have, and an amazing
here
human capacity is what's called...
Wait, yeah, new points. So yeah, I guess what was being said here, the concept of also taking into consideration the context that is being applied to what is said. Man, it isn't really that deep in a sense, but on the other hand, it also points out the possibility of truly missing things, and I see it from the perspective of having being close, and not simply close, having talked rather with people who has hearing problems. Now it makes more sense that they have a harder time understanding what you are saying, because in some points their hearing or their attention disappears for a brief moment, and now it also makes sense in the sense of, because it simply disappeared for simply a second, incredibly somehow, just that second is enough to modify everything else, and is enough to almost make invalid what to invalidate what is what was being said before. And what's the whole concept also, I mean, the whole concept also traces back to the idea of, if your attention gets disrupted in the middle of something that is catching that same attention, you will have a harder time getting back into what you were doing than if you were simply trying to follow up everything. And in that same sense, it also gets added the layer of, it does not only apply to those who have hearing problems, as in they somehow do not have the capacity of following what you were saying, or following not, of fully hearing what you were saying, but also on the side of those who somehow have a harder time following what you are saying. Because if your brain can't process rapidly enough what is being said, you will also find yourself having troubles following anything, as you need to come up with a completely unsolved sentence, let's say, as these sentences are in a more rough manner, things that are completely put together by the one who speaks, and you just need to hear it and make sense out of it, but you don't need to see how everything fits. You have already in your hands been given the understanding about how it fits, and you just simply need to put it in your mind together to keep and to respond to what is being given to you. No? So I don't know, very very crazy on one hand, on the other really not that deep. But yeah, I mean, also very interesting, very interesting. I guess, yeah, the lack of knowledge about this thing really seemed out of nowhere incredibly big. I mean, I think, yeah, we're almost 15 minutes inside of this lesson, and I have already found like 3 responses to questions that I have never would have thought would be found here. So yeah, I don't know, crazy stuff.
Categorical perception. So we have all this huge range of physical sounds that can come to our ear, and kind of brilliantly, and you don't even think about it. I mean, none of you go around bragging about your categorical perception abilities, right? Like when you go to spring break, right? And maybe some of you will go home or you'll see friends and you won't go, I have categorical perception. I try to be modest about it, but it's an amazing human talent and essential, because what it does is this. We hear this huge range of sounds depending on accents, what comes before, what comes after, and we have to decide that's a B. And what you're going to do is take this huge range of things and just go, boom, it's a B or a D, and that's all there is to it. So here's the way they do it. So categorical perception, sounds can vary continuously. We showed you some of this continuity. In this experiment on purpose, they're going to vary sounds in a very continuous physical way. But in our heads, for ba and da here, in our heads, all the stuff that's over here, even though they're very different one from the other at a physical, specific level, we'll say, ba, I'm done with it. We're going to put it into one category for interpretation. And you're going to have a pretty sharp boundary here, and everything over here, all these physical signals, you're going to call pa. And so you're not going to spend a lot of time going, that was a 1/3 ba, 2/3 pa probability. We couldn't do that, right? Because you couldn't get through a word, never mind a sentence. You're going to instantly group huge numbers of things that are they're different from one another into 2 categories that need to be separated. So here's a kind of experiment they do. I'll just give you the feeling of it. Here's what they're varying, okay, in constant units. Constant units, every stimulus here is different. But every time you hear ba, and they're constantly going to vary something about its physical property, you always call it a B. And then something happens in about 20 milliseconds of information, and boom, you always call it a P. Okay? So change in the physical signal, you call it one category. A little bit more change, boom, it's the other category. and you keep changing, but for you, it's always a perfectly good P, even though every one of those are different. Right? So it's an amazing fundamental capacity to take a huge, for all practical purposes, an infinite variety of inputs and say it's a B or a P if that's the world I'm working in. Syntax. That's another way in which we understand things, the way that words are organized in their order. So we could say the model embraced the designer and the photographer. Imagine somebody saying to this, but then they complete the sentence. The model embraced the designer and the photographer laughed. Okay? So people who study syntax really are interested in what happens in your mind as you hear the model embraced the designer and the photographer, and some big group hug is going on, right? And then all of a sudden you get this word laughed, and all you have to do is rearrange the elements in your mind. That's what syntax is letting you do, to say, oh, the meaning is really quite different. Okay, there's only one hug going on and one person laughing at them, right? But the meaning over time, as somebody talks to you, is set up. You're thinking this, boom, because you understand syntax, you understand what happened. Semantics are kind of more straightforward. They're how we usually think about them. They're the meaning of words or sentences, morphemes.
Okay, wait. This is a completely different thing, so give me a second. I guess one of the few things that is also important is to comprehend, in that sense, how properly having a well-developed syntax about how sentences are made gives you the possibility of not being so entrapped on what is your vision of the world, because it wasn't directly mentioned, but what he kind of passed by is the idea of, if you see something, you will notice that it is there on one hand, while on the other, if you see something that is missing some parts, you will need to fill that information or those missing places, those places missing information with what you can come up with. And it is easier to do it, I will guess, if you don't have such a complex array of comprehension about the context. While on the other hand, if you had the whole, not only the context, but as I was saying, a more developed and probably well put together understanding about how different syntaxes and such get applied to the sentences, you might as well, wait. Would it mean that you would understand more, or that you would get more trapped on what things could differently mean? As in one hand, I will say, you can probably get what they are trying to say, but on the other side, you also have the problem now of, maybe because you understand so much more about how, for example, what was being said there. If the syntax gives you the possibility of arriving at 20 different conclusions, you will also now need to discriminate between those 20 different conclusions to choose only one. I mean, I will say, you simply give your brain ways in which it can work differently, and it chooses based on the context that is back that on what you already have knowledge about how it might keep unraveling itself when you lack the whole view of what is happening. While on the other side, if you can see somehow every single thing that simply exists, it goes back to what we were saying. You don't need to think about what is being said. You only need to make sense out of it, to process it, and to give a proper response to it. On the other hand, if you lack cues, you need first and foremost to fill the blanks. And that is, I don't know if it is harder or not. I will say it is simpler if you have less syntax understanding. But that is all so far.
And we can understand semantics even when the sentence is nonsense, colorless, green ideas sleep furiously is a famous example. But we can understand semantics even in bad grammatical senses, right? Fastly, eat dinner, ball game starts soon, Your fifth grade teacher would be up in arms to hear that, but you understand, eat now, go see the ball game, right? Okay, so we get through a lot of stuff to get semantics, and we can see interactions. I stole this example from Ted Gibson because it took me like 20 minutes to figure out what the sentence means. You're probably faster than I am. Yeah, are you okay? I'm going, the old man, where's the missing words? Or the old man the boats, okay? So, this is how you have to parse up the sentence. It's not always obvious. People who study language love these things where people are all confused. Most of our lives, we don't go through that much confusion, but there's some fun ones, sort of like the visual illusions, to point out how meaning and syntax can interact as you figure out things. Here's another example. Jay Leno talked about sex with Lindsay Lohan. Okay, now wait a minute. Did I miss that excellent episode of Jay Leno? Or was she on the show and talking about just saying, I'd rather not talk about my recent conviction. I'd rather talk about something less controversial. Okay, so semantic, all these things are constantly interacting in your mind. It's kind of amazing when you think about that, right? We said phonology is amazing. Semantics, syntax, boom, they're all happening in you. And none of you are sitting there going, just a phonology. Please don't ask me to do semantics, We just had midterms, right? Brilliant. So one of the ways that people
Okay, I guess in a sense now it also traces back to what was being explained, or what not here even, what happens constantly when you try to learn also about something that is rather confusing. What he said, what the professor said about the different semantics people being happy when you find yourself with sentences that sometimes lack things and some others are like puzzles for you to solve. In those moments, I will guess even it is a brain exercise to see how much you can find out of a simple thing, rather because you also now have the possibility of taking it apart and seeing how by rearranging what is being said it can vary what it means and such. But yeah, I mean, what the teacher said at the end, you really don't see yourself saying, oh my fucking god, I have to make sense of what is being said here. I can't believe it. I hate it. You rather do it so automatically that you don't even become aware about it. Yeah, I mean, crazy, probably. I mean, it literally feels like the craziest thing to know about at this point, somehow. I don't know.
do semantics, We just had midterms, right? Brilliant. So one of the ways that people try to convince themselves that these things are separable and gives a little bit more insight is evoked response potentials. Those are these things that you can measure on infants or adults that measure electrical activity in milliseconds, at the speed of language processing, surface electrodes that give you an index of a few 100,000 neurons. And this is an example you saw before, actually, earlier in the course, the so-called N400. So N means whether the wave is going up or down, negative or positive. 400 means it occurs about 400 milliseconds, about half a second after the relevant event. So here's this, let's see, it was his first day at work. That's the baseline. He spread the warm bread with socks. Oh my gosh, socks, semantically bad. And here comes the N400, okay? And the control condition is you throw up this unexpected word shoes. That's weird, but not semantically, and you get quite a different response. So here's an N400 that seems to be about semantic expectation or congruence. How about if you mess up syntax? The spoiled child throw the toys on the box, and, then you get a response at about 600 milliseconds to syntactic incongruity. So people, this is just more evidence that in the brain, meaning or semantics and syntax or something about word order are processed somewhat differently in time and place. Pragmatics is kind of fun. It's practical understanding, right? The old joke, you know what time it is, and the person says yes. They're messing with your sense of pragmatics. Two negatives make a positive, saying, oh, yeah, I've heard that one before earlier in the lecture. Now, here's something kind of interesting, again, which is remarkable. And if you didn't do the experiment, you couldn't know that our mind is like this, because you wouldn't do things like this except because it sounds too ridiculous, but your mind does it all the time. So we're going to think about the word bugs. And I have to set you up a little bit with paradigms you've heard before, but just remind you of these things. So one kind of task that psychologists like to use to think about how people process words is a lexical decision task. All you're deciding is whether a word is a real word or a nonsense word. Okay? So doctor is real, proctor is not, spy is a real word. This spelling is not a real word. Okay? So a real word, not a real word. We also talked about one other idea earlier in the course, that if prior to processing a word like doctor, you get an unrelated word or a related word, you process doctor faster if you had a related word before it, semantic priming. The ideas about nurse overlap a lot with the ideas about doctor, and seeing this word before makes you process this word faster. So you need those two things in mind. What's the person doing? Is it a real word or not? And you're going to mess with what's in their mind before that, related or unrelated. And here's the experiment. So you would hear over headphones something like this as an example. Rumor has it that for years, the government building had been plagued with problems. Now here's the critical sentence. The man was not surprised when he found several spiders, roaches, and other bugs in the corner of his room. So there's two senses of the word, at least two meanings of the word bug, right? The insect you don't want in your soup, or the microphone that somebody slipped into your room to listen to what's going on. 2 different meanings for the word bug. This is obviously about the insect. So the person's hearing this over headphones, and on a computer monitor in front of them, after they hear the word bugs here, they see for lexical decision the word ant, which is related to this meaning, or spy, which is related to the other meaning that's not relevant for here, or so, which is the control condition. We'll ignore that. Okay, that's just a control condition. I'll ignore that for a moment. So you're making a lexical decision now on the related meaning or the unrelated meaning. And here's what they find. If it's the related meaning, and you only have about a half second from when that came on to when you had to do this task, so you saw the word bug and here comes this, you're faster. But if you get the unrelated meaning within a half a second of processing the word, you're also faster. What this means is your mind has done exactly what you would think it wouldn't do. Your mind has looked up in your brain and in your knowledge of vocabulary every meaning of the word. Even though the sentence is clearly setting you up for the word, the insect meaning, isn't it? Every meaning of your word is turned on and available to you. Your mind does the opposite of what you might think. You might think, well, I know, let's look at the sentence. I know once I get spiders, roaches, and bugs. By here, you know you're in the insect world, not in the world of spies, right? Okay? But your mind, even then, looks up every possible word. Because it's cheaper for the mind to look up every word than to start to decide what the appropriate word is. And then if you wait another second and a half, you're only fast for the selected meaning. And now you're slowed down for the one that's not context relevant. So your mind looks up everything all the time, every meaning of every word you know. Every time that word pops up, it seems like your mind looks up every meaning, and then the rest of your mind selects out the one that's relevant and shuts down the ones that are not. But you wouldn't think that. You'd think maybe I'll just get the one I need. I'm not going to get everything. It's like I'm not going to put all my clothes on, walk outside, and take off everything that's not relevant for the weather, right? All right.
Okay, I mean, okay. I would think a proper explanation for that would lie in the fact of we don't really have a possibility about every single time completely comprehending what it means by simply hearing it. That is why you have to take what is given to you. I guess probably I was wrong. You have to take what is given to you and make sense out of it based on your previous knowledge. And if your previous knowledge might point into a different direction, you might also see it differently based on the easiest path. Not because the easiest path is the easiest one by itself, but rather because what is easy might as well end up being easy because you are so accustomed with it. I mean, trying to make an example would be something like, if you have after so much time heard that people who say, or not heard, if you have after so much time learned that when somebody asks you to know about how you are, by simply responding, I'm fine, you will have an easier time simply not interacting with someone that way than to completely unraveling your whole existence and explaining to them how you are doing and the different problems that are plaguing yourself and similar. You will, in that same sense, find yourself not so troubled by every single thing that has to deal with the notion of these things. Rather, you will simply have to make, I don't know if sense is the correct word here, but really you will simply see, or you will simply find yourself going for the easiest path, as you know that is the one that will give you less trouble, the one of less resistance. That is the word that I was searching for. But yeah, I mean, another optic here might be also that when you can properly extract out of things multiple meanings, you might also see hidden messages. Because, for example, I mean, I guess it will be mentioned later on, and sadly it happens that we don't have that much time to talk about it today, or specifically on this stream, but I will guess it gets mentioned, the idea of, because you can check for every single meaning of a word, it is that you can also find hidden messages behind almost everything, as they represent, or not as they represent, sorry, they have to be extracted by you learning about them instead of they simply popping up out of nowhere, let's say. Yeah, I mean, the point was, that is also why you can see and comprehend what is double speech and similar, because you can find in I don't know if congruences or simply things that catch your attention, probably simply, let's say like that, simply that things that catch your attention on the speech of someone might point you towards a deeper message here. And in those cases, it also is necessary for you to be constantly aware, because if you were to simply take the easiest or the first response that appears in your mind, no matter which one is it, you will not really have a chance at understanding what they are talking about sometimes, or what they could be hinting towards, even if they are not directly saying anything like that. As it sadly happens that in some cases we like to engage in conversations in which we do not utilize direct words to address a specific problems. We rather go in roundabout ways to see how it is that we can somehow mention something that is happening without, or because we need to not be clear about it. So yeah, I guess incredibly crazy, probably incredibly crazy. But yeah, I don't know. Do I have anything else to say? No, I think not. So well, I think not that I think, sadly. This I don't think. This I know it, sadly. Yeah. Eh, here we are. Here we are. What this means is that we have finished this actual lesson. Sadly, because as always, quote unquote, we are running on a tight schedule, so it means that I need to give this a closure and I need to leave. But yeah, I mean, as always, it is very interesting to see where we end up on and what we can learn from this. I mean, as I said before, in this particular lesson, we find a lot of resources to take from and to utilize and to integrate into the rest of our existence, as it gives you the capacity of also making more sense about some problems that happen and some problems that I don't know if they simply plague our existence, or rather that they just happen to be present in our life, you know? But yeah, very interesting as always, I will say. And yeah, I don't know. I will guess we will have to see. Happily enough, today, after finally making some proper decisions, we are going to have still 2 more learning times or studying times about stuff like this. So yeah, in that sense, very well. And yeah, I don't know. I will guess if they are going to be on this same path of knowledge, we are going to keep extracting even more crazy stuff like this, I will guess. But yeah, truly nice to see it, you know? I will say the possibility of finding anything in particular hidden on less important things, or less, what is the word, less apparent things, also gives the possibility of properly integrating even more tools into what we know and what we could know in the future. So yeah, truly grateful for this time spent here. I mean, what a crazy thing it is to see so much hidden messages almost on everything, as it also, I mean, it opens up the possibility of trying to see, for example, one of the things that I just noticed, it opens up the possibility of learning about the context of different words, to see sometimes what it means, what somebody's saying, not because what they are saying has a hidden meaning by itself, but rather because you can notice that somebody is hinting at something hidden inside of themselves. In that same sense, maybe that is also why psychology sometimes utilizes the act of simply speaking about completely random things and making it or transforming it into something so utterly different that it becomes truly a wonderful new hidden message thing to unravel. And that's hello Klondike, welcome. I mean, welcome, and sorry for sorry for this, but we're ending, my man. we're close to end. we're close to ending this game, my man. This is so sad. This is so sad. But yeah, welcome. Welcome anyways. As always, it is never too late. So yeah, I guess. yeah. Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, truly crazy, you know? I mean, wonderful almost. I will say, yeah, we will truly cherish the possibility of seeing what else is there in the next occasion. Man, what a crazy stuff it is. I will say probably the possibility of also trying to go directly for things like this is not more useful, rather interesting, as I said before, it opens up the possibility of seeing more than what there was before by using the capacities that we carry over learning about anything at all, like these concepts in this case. So yeah, I guess we're going to call it a day so far. But yeah, next time we're going to see more, happily enough. So yeah, what an incredible thing, you know? So well, anyways, what I was going to say is, yeah, as always, before anything else, thanks for being here. Thanks for the possibility. Thanks for watching, for being present. It is beautiful. It is a nice occasion. And well, we're going to leave. We're going to take a break. We're going to rest a little bit the mind. And we are going to raid who? Night Chase VR, who is... There is a category named education. What the actual fuck? What did I just learn about this? I am a stupid. No, this is so sad. This was the category that I should have been using for so man. I am angry. Anyways, what? When did this category get integrated on Twitch? Anyways, what the fuck? This is a flashbang of information, my man. I wanted to say, yeah, we're going to raid Night Chase VR, who is watching some old anime under the category of education. But yeah, do we have the votes? Do we not have the votes? Yeah, we don't have the votes anyways. But yeah, as always, thanks for being here, thanks for the attention, for lurking, for watching the vote, for everything, people. Thanks in this particular case to Klondike for being here. And well, next time we're going to learn some more. But until that time arrives, remember to stay safe, to stay well, to take care of yourself. Now we say goodbye, and until the next occasion, we will be nice. Now, raid. Bye. Man, there is a fucking category named education.